Hello, Star Citizens. Welcome to a new series all about ship components where we help you understand the things you're putting into your ship and what all the numbers mean. Hopefully, we can help you make some decisions about what to put in your ships. Remember, digital ships aren't imaginary. Digital ships are Imagine-necessary. Every month we do a giveaway. This month's giveaway prize will be announced later in the month. To enter, subscribe to the channel, like or dislike, and leave a comment on all the videos from this month. Also, we're doing a contest this month as an addition to our normal giveaway. Get 2 people to purchase the game using our code that's up here on the screen, and a 3rd person to purchase the game using another code of your choice, and you will win a Saber Firebird or a combo pack, including a Ursa Medevac, MPUV Tractor, and Aurora MR, and all prizes have LTI. For the full giveaway and contest details, make sure you visit our Billionaire Ninjas Discord or our social media at Ninjas Leap. Today we are doing a video on the basics of ship coolers. Before I start to talk about that, I want to get into why I'm doing these videos. So as of the doing of the power plant video, a lot of people were telling me these stats were irrelevant. Well, they are part correct and part incorrect, as we tend to see on the internet. So some of the stats are irrelevant. Some of the stats don't matter because the gameplay for those particular stats are not in yet. However, all of the stats are not irrelevant. There are some stats that are very much so relevant in the game. And we will start, as of this video, to denote which ones of those are relevant and are irrelevant, okay? Continuing, coolers are components that manage heat generated by other ship components, such as power plants, shields, and weapons. Their primary function is to prevent these components from overheating, which can lead to reduced performance or even temporary shutdowns. This is part of a series, so make sure you watch our Ships Component Basics video, or you might be missing out on some key information. The science of a cooler, we're going to get into some tech here, is normally separated into 3 parts: radiator, oil cooler, and intercooler when talking about traditional vehicles, and thermoelectric and compressor coolers on an electric vehicle. Oil isn't necessary as far as we know in Star Citizen, so we'll combine the others to get this basic definition of what a cooler does in the game. When a current passes through the junction of 2 different conductors, it transfers heat from one side to the other, creating a cool side and a hot side. A refrigerant and a compressor are used to create a cooling cycle. The hot coolant flows through thin tubes surrounded by fins. Air flowing through the radiator, either naturally or forced by a fan, carries away the heat from the fins and the coolant, while also using ambient air to cool the compressed air when available. All right, now that's my barely intelligible lesson for how coolers actually work. I'm sure there's an engineer that's going to light me up in the comments about how terrible that is, but it's the future, so I can be as terrible as I want because technically this technology doesn't exist yet. Anyway, continuing on. Now, facts about the game and the primary purpose of the cooler in your ship. The primary purpose, of course, is heat management. Coolers dissipate the excess heat produced by other components, keeping them within safe operating temperatures. Then there's component efficiency. By preventing overheating, coolers help maintain the optimal performance of other ship systems and parts. Weapons, keeping anything from overheating that can and allowing longer firing volleys or quicker firing volleys. Shields generate heat, especially when pushing more than 33% to them in the power triangle. When a future iteration of engineering gameplay comes online, you'll be able to overheat your shields, but shields can operate at higher levels for longer with better cooling. Ship performance. A higher class cooler would generally provide either a stronger level of cooling or a more efficient level of cooling, keeping parts at their optimal operating temperature. Component compatibility. Some components, especially high-end competition grade items, may end up requiring stronger coolers, or they will overheat constantly. I don't know why I can't say overheat today or constantly today. Anyway, continuing on. Customization. Players can choose different coolers to suit their playstyle and ship build. A balanced cooler might be ideal for a general purpose ship, while a strong cooler may keep your initial temperatures extremely low, but get worse over time, which is more useful for military ships, which are out for shorter missions. However, a weaker cooler that focuses on efficiency might be better for long-term mining or salvage operations. Let's get into some short description of each category you might need to look out for with a cooler. The manufacturer. At this point, there isn't really a way to discern quality of parts from a manufacturer, but pay attention in the future to this being a way to determine what class, grade, size, and quality to expect when you hear about each manufacturer's name. So, as I talked about in my last video, it might be lightning power limited might create lower grade cheap coolers that last a few weeks before having issues, while Juno Starwork only creates the grade A parts that last years, but they might cost an arm and a leg and have high maintenance. So we'll see that certain manufacturers make better parts in certain categories, certain classes, and certain grades. Speaking of classes, for class, we went over this in another video, but it's what role the part is meant to fulfill. For instance, military is meant to have peak performance and high damage durability, but produce a higher signature and will be high maintenance. Industrial parts will have low performance, but will also be low maintenance and focus more on efficiency and longevity. Grade. We went over that in another video as well, but it signifies the quality of the part, but it's not an end-all be-all on quality. It's only part of the factors to consider. For instance, a higher quality part may also come with a higher heat signature or EM signature, making you light up like a Christmas tree to everyone, whereas a grade D part may keep you fairly undetected even though it's not as quality of a part. So if you need to be stealthy, you wouldn't want to grab the grade A part, you would want to grab the grade D part. Now, obviously, stealth is a type of class. So obviously you can grab a stealth part that's grade A, but again, grade A may not always be the best. So don't think that just because it says grade A, it's the best for your particular role. Always look for what you need on that particular mission or for that particular ship before purchasing a part. Size. This determines its compatibility with different ships and its overall performance. Sizes for coolers go from size 0 to size 4. Cooling rate. The maximum cooling the cooler can generate. The speed at which an object cools down is measured in degrees per minute. Suppression heat factor. Used to estimate the rate of thermal heat transfer between a cooling fluid and a surface. Suppression IR factor. Used to estimate the rate of infrared radiation heat transfer between a cooling fluid and a surface. Power draw request time. The time it takes for a cooler to reach its maximum cooling output when it's initially activated or after a complete shutdown. This is measured in seconds. A lower request time means your ship can cool off parts faster that overheat during a fight, giving you a tactical advantage, or it can overheat them in a more efficient way while you're doing industrial gameplay. Some coolers prioritize a low request time to quickly cool system to keep from giving away your position. Power base. The amount of power a ship can generate and distribute to various systems in relation to the power plant. The power plant generates power and heat. The cooler dissipates the heat, allowing the power plant to continue ramping up until it overheats. This also affects EM signature. Higher means more cooling and a higher signature. Lower means less cooling, but also a lower signature. Power draw. The amount of power the cooler draws from the power plant. Power plants will only output so much power when the gameplay comes online. You will have to choose parts whose total power draw adds up to the number equal to or less than the power output of the power plant. To give you an example, you might have a cooler in your ship and you might have a quantum drive in your ship. You might have a mining laser in your ship. If you have all three of those parts, and let's say the power draw of each one of those is 10, right? That would be 3 parts. So that would add each power draw is 10. So that would be 10 plus 10 plus 10. We got 30, right? If your total power draw that your total power output from your power plant is 50, then you can still add 2 more parts or a total of 20 more power draw to that power plant. If your power plant has a less than number of 30, one of those parts will not function when you put it in the ship. This is not currently in gameplay yet, but this is how this power draw is expected to work. So a lot of people think that they'll just be able to go in and add full grade A parts and just be done with the entire conversation. However, that will not necessarily be the case. When you have high performance parts, they will require higher power outputs, and there may not be a power plant that can handle full grade A parts or full military parts or full competition parts, etc. Those may be blocked by reputation, your ability to buy them, so on and so forth. They may not exist. They may only exist in the ability for you to purchase them in a star system that's very far away. So it's not as simple, again, as just popping in a grade A part. It is currently pretty simple. It's normally between an A or B, but it won't be that simple in the future. Moving on. Power to EM, also known as PTEM, this represents the ratio of cooling output to electromagnetic emissions produced by the cooler. A higher PTEM value means the cooler is more efficient at cooling relative to the amount of EM it generates. Lower EM emissions make it harder for enemies to detect your ship. Decay rate of EM. The speed at which the electromagnetic signature of a ship decreases over time. Ships generate an EM signature when using power-intensive systems like weapons and shields. This signature can be detected by enemy ships and used to track or target them. The decay rate of EM determines how quickly this signature fades away after the power-intensive systems are deactivated. A higher decay rate means the signature fades faster, making the ship harder to detect and track. Max cooling rate. The maximum amount of heat a cooler can dissipate per second. Coolers generate heat as they operate, and excessive heat can damage or even destroy the cooler. Also, the hotter the cooler, the higher your heat signature and the easier it is to detect. However, this stat on a cooler will generally be at a minimum, so it's likely irrelevant to gameplay for this particular component. Start cooling temperature. The temperature at which the cooler's cooling system begins to actively dissipate heat. If the temperature exceeds the start cooling temperature, it indicates that the cooling system needs to work harder to dissipate heat, which can lead to increased power consumption and potential damage if not managed properly. Again, because this is the cooler, this is generally going to be an irrelevant stat on the particular component. Minimum temperature, the lowest temperature at which the cooler can function effectively without suffering damage or reduced performance. It might freeze or cease functioning if it gets too cold, but generally this will be a non-factor for this component because the cooler, the better generally for a cooler. Max temperature, the threshold at which the cooler will begin to overheat. If the temperature exceeds this particular limit, the cooler's performance may decrease, or it may even suffer damage and eventually shut down or completely break. This will be a very difficult number to hit for a cooler because of its main purpose being to cool. So its max temperature will not be reached easily, but there may be certain things in the game in the future that cause your cooler's temperature to increase regardless of the fact that its primary purpose is to cool things. Recovery temperature. When a cooler's temperature exceeds its maximum temperature, it will start to overheat. However, when the cooler's temperature falls below the recovery temperature, it will start to cool down and gradually return to normal operating temperatures. This is not relevant to a cooler. Start IR temperature. The initial temperature of the cooler when it is first activated or turned on, it represents the baseline temperature from which the cooler will start to generate heat as it operates. A higher start IR temperature means the cooler will begin operating at a higher temperature, potentially making it more prone to overheating if not managed properly, largely irrelevant to a cooler. Temperature to IR, the rate at which the cooler's temperature increases its infrared signature. Infrared radiation is the heat signature emitted by objects like ships and their components. A higher IR signature makes a ship more detectable by enemy sensors and targeting systems. Largely irrelevant to a cooler. I know a lot of these are largely irrelevant, but we're coming to some that actually matter. Thermal energy base. The amount of heat energy a cooler generates simply by being turned on and operating at its baseline level. The minimum amount of heat the cooler will produce, even when it's not under load. The baseline heat generation can affect the ship's temperature and influence the need for cooling solutions. This, again, is not relevant to a cooler, but this next one is. Thermal energy draw. The amount of heat energy a cooler generates while operating. This is a measure of how much heat the cooler releases into the ship's environment, contributing to the overall heat load. This is very important for a cooler because this is how much, when the cooler is cooling things off, if it's pulling heat off of things, this is what's going to lead to the thermal energy reading for other players and how well they can see your ship. So that heat is very important, and how well the cooler can draw that energy off and release it into the environment is going to be a major factor for a cooler. Thermal mass, another important stat. In fact, it might be one of the most important stats for a cooler after cooling rate. A cooler's capacity to store heat is its thermal mass. A higher thermal mass means the cooler can absorb more heat before its temperature rises significantly. Conversely, a lower thermal mass means the cooler's temperature will change more rapidly with changes in heat generation or cooling. Surface area. Components generate heat, and a larger surface area allows for more efficient heat dissipation. Specific heat capacity. The specific heat capacity of the materials used in the cooler's construction would influence how quickly the cooler heats up and how much heat energy it can absorb before reaching its maximum temperature. Differs from thermal mass in that thermal mass is at which point the heat rises, whereas heat-specific heat is how quickly the heat continues to rise and how much heat energy it can absorb in total. A relevant stat as of the making of this video. Thermal conductivity. High thermal conductivity means heat can quickly transfer from its internal components to the surrounding cooling system, like coolers. With low thermal conductivity, heat transfer is slower. If it's higher, you can get away with a less efficient cooler. If it's low, you need a better cooler to pair with any other part. So generally, when we're talking about thermal conductivity, we're talking about another part's thermal conductivity in relation to the cooler, not necessarily this stat on this particular component. So when we look at thermal conductivity, we're not looking at the cooler's thermal conductivity. We're looking at all the other parts that are connected to the cooler. We're looking at their thermal conductivity and comparing it to the quality of our cooler. So again, another irrelevant stat for this particular component, but it's not irrelevant to the cooler in general. Health. This is relevant to every component. This is simply how much damage the component can take before it dies or shuts down. Distortion shutdown damage, distortion decay delay, distortion decay rate, distortion recovery ratio, and distortion warning ratio are all things that I went over in my previous video, so I will not be going over those again because I do believe that those particular stats, even though they are still up, may be retired. So if you do want an explanation, those particular stats are available on my Power Plants Explained video. So go and check out that power plant video and then you can get the rest of those stats. And the last stat we will talk about, of course, is the base price, which is simply the in-game cost of the ship's component. Now, that is what we have for our coolers video. Now, I'll talk really quickly about the most important things that come out of this video when we talk about stats. I do discuss all of the stats, but as I said before, not all stats are equally relevant. Health, not as relevant, but it does provide you some, number to look at in case your parts are targeted and they're shot at. Really, when we're talking about a cooler, we're talking about three primary stats: cooling rate, power draw request time, and we're also talking about thermal mass. Those are the three primary stats for coolers as of this current patch, as of creating this video. So those are the main ones you need to pay attention to. The rest you can, there are some slight variations, but if you pay attention to these three, you'll generally end up with the best cooler. Those are the three that are most important. All right, so when we go into our next video, this next video that we do on coolers will basically just be telling you which ones to purchase, rather than telling you the reasons why to purchase them, because those reasons may change over time. Now, if those reasons change and there is a significant change in the way that coolers work in the game, we will update that video. And once things are more solidified and finalized as far as ship components, we will make a more permanent selection and we will go into why we selected each particular part. But as of now, that video doesn't make sense to make because things are not necessarily finalized. So right now, we're just trying to help people with their ships now and what they should put into their ships going forward, at least until we get a significant update. Now, if you are not subscribed, make sure you hit all on the notification bell so you don't miss our coolers buyer's guide. That is coming. We do have a lot of people that aren't subscribed, so if you're not subscribed, why don't you just say, hey, this is why I'm not subscribed, and then maybe we can get you in there. And maybe we went, maybe we can't, but who says we can't try? All right, that's it for this one. Thanks for spending your time with us. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.